They say regret is the heaviest burden we carry. Trust me, they're right. 5 years ago, I was living what I thought was my perfectly imperfect love story. The kind that doesn't make it to romance novels, but feels real enough to bet your life on. Now I'm watching that same story play out from the sidelines. Except I've been replaced by someone who actually deserves the happy ending. Let me start at the beginning. I'm Olivia, 30, marketing coordinator for a mid-size firm in Boston. Not exactly changing the world, but the job paid well enough to support my carefully curated lifestyle. The kind where your Instagram tells a better story than your bank account. It was during one of those pretentious charity fundraisers, the kind where everyone's there to be seen, rather than to actually support the cause. When I first noticed Ryan, he wasn't working the room like the other guys in tailored suits. Instead, he was by the bar, deep in conversation with the elderly bartender, both of them laughing like they were sharing the world's best joke. Ryan wasn't what you'd call conventionally handsome. He had this slightly crooked nose from a childhood baseball accident, and his hairline was already starting its slow retreat despite him being only 33. His shoulders hunched a bit when he walked, the result of years spent behind a desk at the city's Department of Transportation where he worked as a traffic engineer. Not exactly the dream guy I'd sketched in my head during my more romantic moments, but something about him caught my attention. Maybe it was how he listened, really listened, when people spoke. Or how he could tell these elaborate stories about traffic patterns that somehow became the most fascinating thing you'd ever heard. Most guys I dated were all about broadcasting their accomplishments. Ryan seemed more interested in understanding the world around him. Our first date wasn't at some trendy restaurant with a 3-month waitlist. We went to this hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese place where the menus were laminated and stained with hoisin sauce. The owners knew Ryan by name, and before I knew what was happening, extra dishes were appearing at our table, on the house, for Ryan and his beautiful friend. He blushed when they said that, this grown man actually blushing, and something inside me melted a little. Dating Ryan was different. He was the kind of guy who kept trail mix in his car because you never know when you might get hungry, and who would stop in the middle of a walk to help an elderly person with their groceries. He remembered random details about my childhood that I'd mentioned once in passing. When I told him about my 4th-grade talent show disaster, he showed up the next week with a tiny trophy he'd had custom-made that said, "World's Bravest Recorder Player." I'll admit I wasn't always completely honest with Ryan. When he'd ask about my shopping trips, I'd conveniently round down the price tags. When credit card bills came in, I'd intercept them before he could see the damage. Little omissions, you know? Nothing serious. The proposal wasn't what I'd imagined for myself. No helicopter ride over the city or flash mob in Central Park. Instead, Ryan proposed during our regular Saturday morning coffee on his tiny balcony. The ring wasn't from Tiffany's. It had belonged to his grandmother, a simple vintage piece that didn't quite fit with the statement rings my friends were flashing on social media. "It's perfect," I said when he slid it on my finger. And in that moment, I almost believed it myself. Wedding planning revealed the first real cracks. I had visions of a waterfront venue with string quartets and hand-calligraphed invitations. Ryan kept talking about budgets and what we could actually afford. He didn't understand that some things were worth stretching for, that this was our one chance to have the perfect day. "We don't need to start our marriage drowning in debt," he'd say, missing the point entirely. So I got creative. A separate credit card here, a small personal loan there. Nothing we couldn't handle once we combined our finances, I reasoned. And the wedding? It was beautiful, scaled down from my original vision, but I told everyone we wanted something intimate and meaningful. Rather than admitting Ryan's traffic engineer salary couldn't support the wedding I'd been planning in my head since I was 12. Married life with Ryan was comfortable. Not the passionate whirlwind romance movies had promised, but steady. He'd make me laugh even when I was determined to stay angry at him. He'd bring me coffee in bed every Sunday morning without fail. When I was passed over for a promotion, he spent an entire weekend helping me update my portfolio while reminding me of all the reasons I was exceptional. But there were moments when I'd scroll through Instagram and see college friends vacationing in Bali or showing off their newly renovated homes. Moments when Ryan would wear the same 3 button-downs on rotation to dinner with my colleagues, or when he'd excitedly explain his latest traffic flow optimization project to my friends, whose partners were launching startups or making partner at law firms. In those moments, I'd feel this nagging disappointment, this sense that maybe I'd settled, that maybe the reason our relationship worked was because I was compensating, making it look better from the outside than it felt from within. His family welcomed me at first. His mother, Eleanor, was this warm, no-nonsense woman who made the best apple pie I'd ever tasted, and who looked at Ryan like he hung the moon. His younger sister, Megan, was a financial advisor with a sharp wit and sharper eyes. She'd watch me calculate wine prices at restaurants or check designer labels when we went shopping together, not saying anything but noticing everything. Things started to shift about a year into our marriage. Ryan got this promotion at work, lead traffic systems engineer, and suddenly he was all about building financial security and planning for our future. He started suggesting we track our expenses with this budgeting app, creating categories and targets for everything from groceries to entertainment. It's not about restricting, he'd explain patiently. It's about being intentional. But it felt like restriction to me. When I'd splurge on a new outfit for work or invest in the latest skincare line everyone was raving about, Ryan would furrow his brow and ask if we'd budgeted for it. He didn't understand that as a marketing professional, appearance matters. You can't show up looking like you're barely getting by, even if you are. So I started keeping certain purchases separate. A secret credit card, hidden shopping bags in the trunk of my car before transferring them into the house, online orders sent to my office instead of our apartment. Small deceptions, hardly worth mentioning. My work friend Diana got it. She understood the pressure to keep up appearances, to look the part even when your bank account was screaming for mercy. When I told her about hiding purchases from Ryan, she nodded knowingly. "Girl, that sounds like financial abuse," she said, swirling her martini. "Controlling your spending is just another way to control you." That phrase, financial abuse, it stuck with me, took root. The more I thought about it, the more it colored my perception of every conversation about money. When Ryan suggested we postpone our trip to the vineyard to build our emergency fund, was that control? When he packed lunches instead of eating out, was that manipulation? The wall between us grew brick by brick, small resentments and half-truths, cementing into something solid and impenetrable. I started skipping dinners with his family, making excuses about work deadlines or migraines. When Eleanor would call to check in, I'd let it go to voicemail, texting back hours later with some vague apology. Ryan noticed. Of course he did. He'd get this look, not angry, never angry, just sad and confused, like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "Is everything okay?" he'd ask, and I'd brush it off with an "of course" or turn it around. Why wouldn't it be? Is something wrong with you? The explosion happened on a random Tuesday night. Ryan had found the statements, all 3 hidden credit cards, totaling just over $93,000 in debt. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He just sat at our kitchen table, statements spread out like some terrible card game, and looked up at me with those eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. We could have figured this out together, but I was already on the defensive, walls up, artillery ready. "Maybe if you weren't so controlling with money, I wouldn't have to hide things," I fired back. "Do you know how humiliating it is to have to justify every purchase? To have your sister looking down her nose at me every time I buy something nice?" The fight escalated, my voice getting louder as his got quieter, until I was practically shouting while he just sat there, shoulders slumped in defeat. "I think we need some help," he finally said. "Maybe counseling. We don't need a stranger telling us how to live our lives." I cut him off. "This isn't about me anyway. This is about you and your need to control everything." After that night, something fundamental changed. We still went through the motions, still said, "I love you" before bed, still posted anniversary photos with heartfelt captions. But the foundation was cracked. I became bolder with my spending, almost daring Ryan to confront me. He became quieter, retreating further into himself. At family gatherings, I'd make these little digs disguised as jokes. "Oh, Ryan's wearing his special occasion shirt again, all 3 buttons still intact," I'd laugh. As Eleanor would wince and Ryan would force a smile, Diana thought it was hilarious. "You're just speaking your truth," she'd reassure me. "If he can't handle that, it's his problem." The final breaking point came during Eleanor's 65th birthday dinner. It was at this nice steakhouse downtown, the kind with dark wood paneling and waiters who introduced themselves by name. I'd had too many glasses of wine, the expensive kind that Ryan had specifically asked me not to order since we were trying to cut back. "When are you two thinking about kids?" Megan asked, probably trying to make conversation during an increasingly tense meal. Ryan cleared his throat. "We're focusing on getting our finances in order first," he said carefully. "Smart," Eleanor nodded. "Children are expensive. Your father and I used to put aside a little each month even before we started trying." "Of course that's all we talk about," I interrupted, reaching for my wine glass. "Money, money, money, the Henderson family obsession." Ryan's hand caught my wrist gently. "Liv, maybe we should switch to water." I yanked my arm away, wine sloshing over the rim. "Maybe you should stop telling me what to do for once in your life," I snapped, loud enough that neighboring tables glanced over. "Olivia," he started, voice low and warning. "What? You'll do what exactly?" The wine, the resentment, the years of feeling not quite enough all combusted in that moment. God, look at you. I could have had anyone, you know that? Anyone. But I ended up with Mr. Traffic Engineer who thinks a wild night is reorganizing the spice rack. The table went silent. Eleanor's face crumpled. Megan stared at her plate. "You're not even that special," I continued, unable to stop the flow of poison. "You're just ordinary, completely ordinary." Ryan didn't raise his voice. He simply stood up, placed his napkin on the table, and said quietly, "I'll see you at home," before walking out. Except he didn't come home, not that night, not the next. I cycled through every reaction: angry voicemails, tearful apologies, defensive justifications. I posted cryptic quotes about outgrowing relationships and knowing your worth that received sympathetic comments from people who had no idea what was really happening. 3 days later, I received an email from Ryan's lawyer about divorce proceedings. Just like that, it was over. The man who had promised to love me forever had finally reached his limit. The aftermath was a blur of practical nightmares. Ryan had removed himself from our joint accounts. The minimum payments on my secret credit cards suddenly became my problem alone. My marketing salary, which had always seemed generous when supplemented by Ryan's income, now barely covered my basic expenses. I crafted a careful narrative on social media, vague posts about new chapters and choosing joy, that implied I was the one who had made the difficult but necessary decision to leave. The likes and supportive comments poured in, but they felt hollow, like applause for a performance no one realized was fiction. Reality hit in waves. First came the apartment downsize, from our sunlit 2-bedroom to a studio with questionable plumbing. Then the gradual social drift. Mutual friends slowly aligning with Ryan, invitations becoming scarcer, text chains going silent. Even Diana pulled away once our champagne brunches and shopping sprees became coffee meetups and window shopping. The cruelest cut came 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I was at Target, not for fun but because they had the cheapest paper towels, when I saw them. Ryan, looking healthier than I remembered, and a woman I didn't recognize. She was nothing like me. Curly hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, minimal makeup, wearing jeans and a Red Sox sweatshirt. They were laughing in the home decor section, debating throw pillows with the comfortable intimacy of people who actually enjoy each other's company. I abandoned my shopping cart and left, sitting in my car until the tears stopped. Later that night, I did what any rational ex-wife would do. I stalked them online. Her name was Nora, and she taught second grade at a public school in Ryan's old neighborhood. According to her modest social media presence, they had met at a community garden project. She posted pictures of homemade meals and sunsets, books she was reading, and students' artwork. Not a designer label or brunch cocktail in sight. Ryan looked happy in every photo, genuinely, unreservedly happy in a way I wasn't sure I'd ever seen when we were together. They moved in together 8 months after meeting, into a small house with a wraparound porch that she was slowly fixing up, documenting the progress with captions full of gratitude rather than staged perfection. Last week, my final twist of the knife arrived via social media. Ryan, down on one knee, proposing to Nora on that same wraparound porch, now strung with fairy lights. The ring looked even smaller than the one he'd given me. But her face, God, her face. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in my studio apartment, calculating if I can afford both electricity and Wi-Fi this month, posting filtered photos with inspirational quotes about finding myself and embracing independence. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent years pretending to be something I wasn't, and now I'm genuinely struggling, but pretending I'm thriving. The hardest part isn't watching Ryan build a beautiful life without me. It's recognizing that he's building the exact kind of life I secretly wanted, but was too busy trying to impress people to admit. Something real, something solid, something true. He found someone who appreciates his steady kindness, his thoughtful practicality, his perfectly imperfect ordinariness. All the things I convinced myself weren't enough. Some nights, I take out the few photos of us I kept after the divorce. In one, we're making homemade pizza in our first apartment, flour dusting Ryan's nose and my hair a mess. Both of us laughing. We look happy, not Instagram happy, but genuinely, messily content. I wonder now if that could have been enough, if I had just let it be. I tell myself I've learned my lesson, that next time I'll value substance over style, reality over perception. But the truth is, there might not be a next time for someone who threw away a good man, because he didn't fit the filtered version of life I thought I deserved. So that's my story, about how I said I could have had anyone to the one person who loved me as I was, not as I pretended to be. About how I chose the appearance of the perfect life over the reality of a good one. About how I'm now eating ramen in a leaky studio apartment, while the man I discarded builds a beautiful life with a woman who knows exactly how lucky she is. Crooked nose and all. They say hindsight is 20/20. They don't tell you how much it hurts to finally see clearly.